to start with another YN podcast episode. For anyone that's a new listener out there, we do these episodes to bring on people that are usually entrepreneurs. We've got a different kind of guest today. Is David McIntosh. He runs the Development by David podcast. He is, I mean, there's too many accolades to be fair. We just touched on it there. I literally read through all your accolades before I came in. I was going to read them out, but I figured that the listener would not get bored hearing all of them, but get to a stage where it's like, right, cool, man, I get the idea. David's done a lot of shit. Like, let me hear about this guy and what he's actually doing, mate. So do you want to touch on a little bit about what you do, and we'll kind of summarise it from there?
I just want to say thank you for inviting me on. I feel like such a fraud because I'm not like a traditional entrepreneur, despite being one of the accolades, being like in the Scottish Business Insider for being the 20th entrepreneur under the age of 35 in Scotland, even though I don't own a business, which is so bizarre. So like I'm a double fraud. So what do? Well, I'm a young 24-year-old man. I work at a place called KPMG, a multinational professional services firm. I'm a management consultant. I run the Development by David podcast. I'm the founder and chair of a UK social mobility network within KPMG that helps 900 less privileged people get into a place like KPMG, navigate that world at work, progress, promote, earn some money, feel like they belong, celebrate their background. Also do a little bit of stand-up comedy, do a little bit of public speaking, and just by nature of doing the things I love, I've been recognised by numerous different award bodies and got to meet with some amazing people along the way and then tell the story for other people to be inspired by. So thank you for having me along.
No, honestly, mate, you summarise those accolades better than what I would have. That's for sure. You clearly have rounded them off before, mate. But there was also, when you kind of touched on the podcast as well, some of the guests you've had on recently have been fucking bonkers, mate. So Tom Hunter, Seth Godin, Rory Sutherland, recent one, Rob Lips, I just listened to as I was coming in. How does that kind of feel, mate, being on the other end of that?
It's weird, like, have you ever heard though that quote, like, work so hard until your idols become your rivals?
Yep.
I think that's bullshit. Work so hard until your idols become your best mates. The fact that I can like just email Rory Sutherland, like an author that I used to read when I was like 16, 17, 18, who was worlds apart, and just have a conversation with him or like interact with him on like Twitter, whatever else is mad. Like being in the same, like having WhatsApp DMs with Rob Lips, a guy that kickstarted my fitness journey when I was like 13, 14, 15, 16. Like, I think that it feels amazing to be on the same realm as these kind of people and them to respect me and not from an egotistical kind of transactional point of view, just because I'm a good person.
Yep.
And they want to be around that. I think that means the world. It's really like affirming that I'm doing something all right and I'm a good person. Yeah. But not only do I get to connect with like people like that, like Seth Godin, Sir Tom Hunter, I get to speak with people like you and like local heroes that I would never get to meet unless I had a podcast or I put myself out there online. So it's micro and macro, mate. It really is.
No, I massively appreciate that, mate. I think like in terms of the kind of macro side of things, the British or the Burberry British Diversity Awards that you're just at, some crazy guests at that, mate, that you're sitting across, like so Stormzy, Alan Carr, the Mayor of London, I think was what you said to me as well. Yeah. What was that kind of experience like, mate?
It's weird, like coming from the background that I come from, like that's a million miles away. Like, genuinely a million, like I can't explain the dreams I would have as a kid. It would look like that. It looked very much like that. And the fact that I was there, literally partying with Dame Kelly Holmes on the dance floor with her. Like I've got Sunita, and like Sunita. Do you know who Sunita is?
I don't, mate, but I've seen you post something on your story about it.
So like I'm in the DMs with Sunita just chatting shit. Like she was on she was like, I don't know if she was married. Paul might know this. She might have been married to Simon Cowell, but she was definitely like best mates with him, and she was on one of the episodes. This is the only place I remember her from, to be honest. The early seed. She was on the X Factor's judges' houses with them. Right. And the fact that I'm just like messaging her after like partying with her is insane. But what was really lovely about that, because the Diversity Awards kind of celebrate all forms of characteristics and people doing great things in great spaces to improve diversity and inclusion. I got to bring people who were part of my social mobility network. So these people are typically from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. So I got to invite people just like me who never thought they could be in a place like that. And just to see their face radiate with an experience like that was just like that's what rich felt like to me. Yeah. Like no money could cement that feeling. It was incredible. But yeah, I had it's so funny. Like I was at the top of the balcony looking over the grand ballroom in the Grosvenor. Celebrities like dotted everywhere, 1,000 people there. And I FaceTimed my dad, right? Who was sitting in his council house, like the same council house I grew up in, like with a can of Tennent's and a cigarette in one hand. and like it was just so nice to share that with my dad. It was almost like he was there, and I didn't stray too far away from my roots whilst being there. And I got to screenshot like a kind of FaceTime with me and my dad, and it was brilliant. As you can see, I'm just waffling here because it was just so electric. The energy's pouring out of me. But like I said, I felt like a boy like me never deserved to be in a place like that. But like the fact that we walked away with an award and kind of really cemented that that's not true.
Well, one of the things I wanted to actually put forward was the fact that I believe that you had earned your right to be there purely because of when I listened to any of the kind of podcast episodes, even just getting to know you over the last year and a half. There is sometimes where like I'm chatting to you and it's very rare that I'll feel out my depth with someone, but it actually happens when I'm chatting to you sometimes.
Really?
Where even just certain phrases, words, certain things that you say and use, and also the way that you speak, and also there's a lot of things that you do that I find incredibly admirable as well, even like the stand-up comedy side of things that you touched on. Like, you're already juggling so many plates. There's one thing that I don't admire, and I think it's how chaotic you are. Like I think you have a lot going on, mate. And I wanted to kind of touch on like how you actually, chaotic's maybe a strong word. I wouldn't necessarily say you're kind of maybe agreeing with me.
I'd say it's chaotic. I'd say it's very chaotic. It's creatively chaotic.
Yeah, because you're juggling a lot of plates. You got the Development by David podcast. You're doing stand-up comedy, which has actually became like, it's almost like every weekend you're doing something around that, whether it's going to a show or actually participating in a show or whatever it may be. You've also got obviously KPMG where you're literally doing fucking exams like on almost like a monthly basis. You're juggling a lot of shit, mate. And on top of that, you're maintaining incredible friendships with some people that we'll touch on later on, because I think those friendships are really important to you. But how do you juggle all of that? And also, how do you add more to it? And what was the kind of, there's too many questions in there. We'll go with those two first.
I think it's a really good reflection. And what I do appreciate about that question is that you've like examined my life, which is really nice. Like you've taken time to like, what does David get up to? Like, what does his routine look like? Like you've looked past the accolades, you looked at the day to day, and you've actually almost considered my well-being in that question. So I really appreciate that. So I think what's important is that all of these things feel like play most of the time.
Yep.
None of them, besides the exams, which are a mandatory product of my career, all the other things add energy to me. I'm quite an extroverted person. I get a lot of my energy from socializing and being in social environments as well. So I think what I've done is, and it's maybe I'm post-rationalizing here, or I'm like throwing a concept over the top of it, but I think I've done not a time audit of where I've spent my time, but I've done an energy audit.
Yep.
So I've audited what gives me energy and what doesn't give me energy. I have definitely dropped things in the past that, like I tried to start a blog. I didn't get much fulfillment from that. It felt like admin. It felt like work. So I dropped it.
Yep.
Whereas doing the podcast and things like that, like meeting people, that actually adds to my energy. So when people are on TikTok scrolling or playing guitar or playing FIFA, I'm editing a podcast or I'm speaking with someone or I'm down the comedy club, either doing a gig or watching a gig. So I think what's important is to, like, for people to be mindful of, like, actually like log how you're spending your time, each individual task, and afterwards rating, did it add to my energy or did it deduct from it? So I'd say 90% of my day is energy adding. And then you've got like the kind of monotonous, like cooking, cleaning that you just need to do.
Yep.
So I do all that stuff. And I've also outsourced quite a lot of the stuff that I do.
Yep.
So like some of these things I don't enjoy with podcasting, like writing the show notes for it, I'll write some points and I'll get AI or use ChatGPT to write it now because I didn't enjoy it. It was laborious for me. Same with like the production of my reels for my podcast. I didn't enjoy the video editing, so I used leverage by outsourcing that to a freelancer. So I think both leverage and doing an energy audit are the biggest things that I've used. And also having like intent as well. Like I use time boxing. So a time box, like I do a brain dump every single day. I think it was Cal Newport, I maybe getting the author wrong, but he said the brain's for having ideas, not storing them. So the more that I can exude onto a piece of paper, the more energy and space and capacity I have for thinking and doing all these things. So one thing that I do is like brain dump everything that's on my mind, my actionable and non-actionable thoughts. And then I use a time box kind of calendar, which looks like 30-minute windows between 7 in the morning and 7 at night. And I just drag and drop these tasks into different 30-minute windows. And that gives me less decision fatigue of what I'm going to have to work on next. And most of my day is pretty automated because of that. So that gives me some more energy back as well. So just all these kind of coping mechanisms and techniques have really added to to that. But there's times where I have burnt out in the past. I've tried to balance too much, and I've felt the repercussions of that. Like I took a kind of stress-induced seizure the night before an exam, maybe in November. Like unfortunately, like I was managing so much that I was like kind of taking ADHD medication just to like get the work done.
Yeah.
And I unfortunately fell to the floor and took a seizure the night before an exam. And thankfully, on 90 minutes sleep, I passed the exam the next day. But that was a wake up call to like subtract some of the things that I was doing and taking and give myself maybe like outsource more things and kind of take more compassion for myself as well. So it's not always been like very well managed. Like there's times where I've felt the brunt of it. So that's why these coping mechanisms now have been so important to me, and I'm glad that they're kind of alleviating some of the necessity for taking things like ADHD meds or taking seizures and things like that.
So what are some of the, like the signs of like prior to that seizures potentially? Like what are some of the signs that you started to recognize that you know you need to kind of dial in a little bit?
So I think self-esteem is your reputation you have with yourself. Okay. And when you start to lose that and you start to have, for me, it's when I start to have poor inner monologue. So when I start dropping the ball on numerous things and the quality of these outputs aren't that great and I start lambasting my character for it, that's probably like the biggest sign. When I start calling myself a loser in my inner talk, that's a sign that I'm approaching burnout. So I think, like your inner monologue is like having a roommate, and if you start to dislike the roommate, you need to have a word with the roommate or change the roommate. And for me, that's the kind of the patient zero of approaching burnout. That's when I start to realize symptoms.
What does your inner monologue sound like now?
Today?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Like I'm so grateful. I'm in a podcast studio in the West End of Glasgow with like such a profound and successful young entrepreneur getting to share a master. Like it doesn't get better than this. I was in London 2 days ago partying with crazy people. I've got so much to be grateful for. I have amazing friends. I'm balancing my energy. I'm looking after myself at present. And I'm being young. Like I've just moved to the West End of Glasgow. I moved at my council house and I'm getting to live my youth. Like right now it's in a really, really good place. I'm pursuing meaningful work as well and helping bring people along the way. And that's rich. Yeah. I don't earn, I see some of the amazing guests that you have and they earn multiples of hundreds of thousands and I don't, to be frank, but I feel really, really rich with the experiences that I have in my life, including this one today. So it feels amazing, mate.
I appreciate that big time, mate. And I think that there's a good few ways that we can take this, mate. But one of the things that you touched on that I think was really important was you touched on your friends, of which I met you through BEMS. Yep. Also then through that, I then met Jude Fredman, who's like been one of my clients, but also one of my closest friends for over a year now. And also Lewis McFarlane, who we've you know, we spend our time together, you know, like on a once a month, once every couple of months kind of basis. And all of those people to me seem like they are incredibly important to you. Would I be right in saying so?
100%. The admiration I have for you, for Jude, for Jabemi or Bems, for Lewis, and for all the people that you've introduced me to, like Lawrence. Like Lawrence helped me out with like parking information in the West End a couple of weeks ago, you know? Like you guys, despite being madly successful in all your realms, it's none of you have an ego. Like you're so, the humility that all you guys have is just hugely admirable, and it keeps me somewhat grounded. Like I'm really lucky that I've had maybe signals of success like these kind of award wins and stuff like that. And it would be easy for a kind of boy from a council house to really become self-absorbed with that. And given that you guys are all experiencing very similar flavors of that and still being at service to others, it keeps me grounded to do the same. So that's been really useful and helpful and something I really respect, especially from you. But what also I like is that one person's win is not a loss to another. Like everyone's like uplifting each other. Yep. I feel like we all admire each other, and that's why we surround each other with each other. It's never like a major win or breakthrough is never at someone else's expense. I've noticed, which I really like. I think an early sign of a fragile relationship is when people start to get jealous. Your friends start to get jealous of wins and great experiences. Whereas I've never experienced that with any of you. And if anything, I can't wait to share. Like I dropped that Rob Lipsett podcast in your DMs because I know how much you liked him and I know how much you'd be happy for me. So that's been hugely important as well. Having people like uplift and recognize my achievements, especially when I go, like I come from this kind of council house, like low socioeconomic background where my parents didn't work. They left school really early. My dad doesn't know what a podcast is. Like I can't go home and share.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't know who Stormzy is, for example. So I couldn't talk about partying with him, or I couldn't talk about winning like Management Consultancy Association awards. Like I can't do that because he doesn't understand it. But because you guys, thankfully, have all created your own path and are all really successful, like despite not being in the same industry, you can recognize the level of some of the achievements that I've had along the way, and that gives me a lot of affirmation and recognition, and it encourages me to go on. So, and I hope I can be that person for you guys as well.
Absolutely.
Because I know a lot of you guys perhaps go home and your parents or your friends or your siblings don't quite understand what you do, but thankfully we have this tribe that do, and yeah, that's been really useful to me as well.
Probably one of the things that inspired me, to be fair, to actually like start the network was that I had my mum who had been in business for 5 years, and it also had a shit ton of experience in the oil and gas side of things, and I realised that not many people actually had that like at all. Nobody had like really anyone to kind of talk to about the business side of things, and as a result of that, you feel a lot of chaos, especially within your own mind, where you're trying to solve a lot of shit. You don't know who to talk to about it. You can't work to any solutions. And I thought it was something that was incredibly important. And on the topic of that, what would be your piece of advice to someone that doesn't have those sort of people around them?
Such a really, really good question. So I'd say understand if you want to surround yourself with like high achievers to kind of have a support network to get you on that mission that you're on. Find out first of all what you want to do. Like that will drive the rest of it. Like what do you actually want? What kind of pursuit do you want to embark on? What kind of dent do you want to leave in the world? What kind of career do you want to have? What kind of side hustle do you want? Understand that. Figure that part out. What you actually want to do. Understand where that goes on. What environments. So if you want to be a stand-up comedian, like there'll be a stand-up comedy course or a club.
Yep.
If you want to be a podcaster, then chap on the local studio. Or if you want to be a squash player, go down like the squash courts, right? So start going to the types of places where these people would hang out.
Yep.
And just be authentic and be bold, because we're all humans. Like everyone in these environments probably want to connect with other humans too. Some people are probably going to be there for the same reasons you are, to meet other people. And I think just understand what results you want, understand what table that exists in, find out who sits at those tables, and ask someone to pull a seat at that table for you is the advice I would give.
Definitely. You touched on authenticity. That was something that you believe is like a superpower on its own. Why is that?
So I'll talk about it from two veins, right? So the first vein would be, I think it's important for individuals to be authentic from a mental health point of view. Like I can't imagine, and I can't imagine because I've been there, but like it is such a struggle to wear a persona, to not tell the truth, because you have to think about your every single action and thought and opinion, because it's contrived. It's not you. Yeah. Whereas if you are authentic, these actions and behaviors and thoughts flow like dead fish in a stream. They just go. Yeah. So I think it's really important, because if you wear a persona and someone compliments your persona or your ego or the facade that you wear, you don't even feel it. Yep. It's the persona that feels it. And you never get a real good feedback loop of who you really are. And you can't, like if you're in this kind of self-development world where you're striving for continuous improvement, but you're wearing a facade and you're getting feedback on the facade, how can you continually improve on that, you know? But also, like if someone gives you, I think it's a really good defense mechanism. Like wearing a persona it's a great defense mechanism whereby people will get constructive feedback. And they'll think, well, I don't need to change because I didn't even show my real self to that opportunity. Like I went to work dressed as someone that loves fine wine and goes ski holidays. Like that's not me. I don't actually need to change. So I think people use it as a vice for not changing or not admitting who they are. So I think it's really important that they do embrace authenticity. But I think it's also important for the wider world to be authentic, because like my podcast, right? Its mission statement is to use origin stories as a self-development tool. I had people like Sir Tom Hunter come to my school when I was 13, 14, tell their very transparent story about growing up in the mining town of New Cumnock and becoming a billionaire. Hearing that authentic, true story and the trials and tribulations that came in between, that allowed me to believe that I could. maybe I wasn't going to be Scotland's next billionaire, but I could do something beyond the periphery in which I was currently existing in. So if you're not authentic, you're doing role modeling a whole disservice as well. Like, you can't be relatable to younger generations. But most importantly, like, so do you know what I love, right? I love seeing the term imposter syndrome being thrown on Instagram and LinkedIn. Like, it's such a bad thing. Oh, imposter syndrome. But we've got the semantics wrong. It's a total superpower. Imposter syndrome is a superpower because, in fact, Paul, who's recording this podcast, everyone in society is somewhat an imposter of each other, because only we have the same unique, complex lattice of experiences, highlights, lowlights, values, insights, opinions that we do. We're all imposters of each other. So when we start to embrace that, that's when innovation and entrepreneurialism occur, when we create value systems of different people with different thoughts and opinions coming together to create solutions. It's an imposter superpower, if anything. And I heard this really great quote. It's you can escape competition by being authentic, because no one can outwork you at being you. And like that's the exact reason why you should be yourself. And yeah, the world will thank you for it.
Absolutely, man. I could not agree more. With the authenticity side of things, it's also, you touched on obviously the latter in terms of like, well, people will not be themselves, so that when they get constructive feedback or criticism, it's like, well, that's not me anyways. So who really cares? But the flip side of that, when you actually become your authentic self and you do get that feedback, but you're also at peace with the feedback and you're willing to work on it, that also in itself brings you so much peace that, like, everyone's a work in progress as well, man. I think a lot of people take it as like you came at the women's fucking David McIntosh interviews like Sir Tom Hunter and does all these incredible things. It's like, well, no, like it wasn't the case, but people see this snapshot of what it's like now. But that continuous work and continuous development to improve your authentic self as well, to amplify it, because a lot of people, they I guess the word would be like, the word's lost me, but it's a lot of people dim that light, they dim themselves, and amplifying that, something in nature of what you touched on earlier on about genuineness. A lot of people come into business, right, and they'll dim their genuineness and then like up their kind of like sales antics and like, you know, really put themselves in positions to convert sales that they're not even fully, you know, convicted on, or the clients that they're potentially working with. And I think that when I think about any of the relationships that I've got, even with any of my clients, I'd like to think the first thing that they would think of was the fact that I have their best intentions at heart. And that itself, I think, is worth more than any fucking sales tactic or any sort of like way in which to you know, extract cash from someone.
I mean, I don't have an organization, right? So I may be talking out of tongue here, but I think I wouldn't recruit someone that I wouldn't be friends with first. And I think I go with the same with my podcast guests. Like, I've never and I might be I'm trying to post rationalize to see if there is anyone that I didn't really enjoy my podcast, but predominantly most people that's been on my podcast I want to be friends with anyway. I would have the exact same conversations even if they weren't recorded. And I really like this kind of the kind of concept you spoke about, or the kind of idea that you spoke about. Like, people might see from the outside, I know these accolades, the 35, the 235 under 35s, or the Queen or whatever else, and think, oh, like David's got it all sorted out. Like, I'm working on delusion and chaos every single day. Every single day. Like, you need to be delusional to get some of those accolades. Like, I never if I thought I was gonna speak, like if I was 21 and thought I was gonna Zoom call the Queen, like how fucking arrogant would I must be to think that at the time. It was, all this stuff is, it's just byproducts of delusion. But the thing is, people see these kind of polished titles, and maybe it's my bad for having that in my LinkedIn bio or my Instagram bio, for looking so polished on the internet, because people think, well, David never misses, or John never misses, but in fact we miss every single day. And I think because of social media and people virtue signaling on social media, it might discourage people from ever starting, because they think that we've never failed, but in fact we have failed so many times to be sitting at this table together today.
100%, mate. I think anything that I've done that's significant started with volume, which was, you know, repetition in the form of failure. Like, it always started that way. So I couldn't agree more, mate. I could not agree more. In the form of, there was one of the questions I did prep around, obviously, people you're referring to in terms of, you know, you're becoming friends with these types of individuals. That, and it's like, there is a kind of like stereotype around like what networking really is, but you built your network of incredible people did that start with the Development by David podcast, or did it start before then, kind of in the work environment? And if so, how did you get started?
Definitely the prolific. Actually, I'm going to say something I've never shared before, actually. So I used to run this blog on Instagram when I was like 15, 16. No, maybe younger than that. And it was like a entrepreneurs blog. And I used to like just showcase different entrepreneurs doing stuff. So I would like highlight Gary Vee and like put a quote. It was like one of these motivational pages. And in fact, Rob Lipsett DM'd that account because I wrote a post about him when I was like 14 or 15. And even on the podcast with him like 2 weeks ago, I was too ashamed to even bring that up.
Wow.
So like there was like little micro fragments of early persistence in young David at that age. But I remember like, I would say that the podcast has definitely been the biggest amplifier of that, the biggest catalyst of it. Like I started off just so my very first podcast guest, a woman called Jen Gillies Pemberton, how I met her, it actually goes back to your question about how do young people start to build their tribe, right? I think it's really kind of synonymous with that. So it was one of my first weeks at KPMG, this multinational accountancy firm. Coming from the background I had, I didn't really have much money at the time. It was my first month at the firm. And I was expected to travel to London. I was getting a flight from Glasgow to London. And obviously I didn't have my first salary yet, so I didn't have much money. And I was at Paisley train station. And they give you like a little fancy American Express gold corporate card to pay for all your travel and stuff like that. But the taxi drivers at Paisley, they lose so much money on the commission that they don't take card, or especially credit cards like that. So I was stranded waiting for my flight. And I looked over my shoulder and there's this wonderful, majestic, kind of elegant, like mid-50 something woman. And she went in this really Ayrshire accent, son, do you mind if I take your taxi? And I went, on you go. And she just looked round at me and she like paused for a second and she went, are you going to the airport? Jump in. So we just spoke about each other's values when we sat in that taxi. She spoke about the charity that she runs in Greater Manchester, focused around social value. She runs, she does amazing things in Greater Manchester. I don't want to go into too much detail for time's sake, but I spoke about like my background, how I really wanted to contribute to social mobility. This is before I started my network, before I spoke with the Queen and started volunteering in the space. And she just saw something in me and she just gave me her business card and said, whenever you need me, just reach out. Yep. And then 18 months later, she came back. So she was living in Manchester. She came back to Irvine and she reached out to me and said, David, how are you getting on? I'd love to meet you. And I said to her, I really want to leave KPMG. I want to start a charity. She went, not just yet, son. You either come and start the Scottish version of my charity, or you start a charity, or you start something charitable within your organisation, play on their dime. And that's what I've done. So 18 months later, I start a podcast. I'm like, I don't have anyone in my network at this point. Like, who's the first kind of micro prolific person I can get on? Oh, Jen, the woman I met at the taxi rank. Yeah. She agreed to come on. So I've went from interviewing someone that I met at a taxi rank to Seth Godin or Sir Tom Hunter. But that isn't just a linear progression. That's just me using each guest and their connections to slowly pan out this complex lattice, spider web, compound interest, affected web of different people. So it's just started from interviewing these people, asking who they know, and getting almost like referrals. I think by interviewing one podcast guest, you probably interview 1.8 because podcasting relies on referrals. Like the amount of people that you could introduce me to now for my podcast. Is incredible. So like I said, it started from just one person and just asking and playing on their generosity for referrals to others. But there's early seeds of a good networker in David, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's it's an important topic to touch on because when a lot of people, they don't get started because they don't actually know where that kind of first step actually lies. And for you, it was this amazing woman that you're referring to at the moment, mate.
And I think it's important. I was thinking about this recently. It's better to be good in a big city than great in a small one. Like when you put yourself in like a big city or in big environments or big industries doing big, bold things, you're competing with the best of the best. So not only do they uplift your aspirations and uplift your adaptation to keep up with them, but you also get to use them as your network and the people that they're networked with. So I think for a young 19-year-old person or someone that's just kickstarting their networking journey, move to a big city or put yourself in a big organization, try and get into a big organization, or go somewhere where these more prolific, aspiring, even young people are kind of hanging around. Yeah, that's probably my advice.
The more kind of like risk averse, I guess, like version of that is just using socials.
Yeah.
Whether it's like LinkedIn for me was where I started with the business side of things, where I would send personalized video messages to every new connection to
Did
get my
you?
way in. Yeah, I
That
sent
is
over
awesome.
1,200 personalized video messages, and I had one rule with them, which was that I would never talk about myself in them. So it was only about them, and that was something that got me in the door with business owners. I didn't know anyone on LinkedIn. I knew my mum, and I knew like maybe like 20 of her connections, but besides that, like I didn't know a soul pretty much. And that was my way of, like, for me it was a form of repel marketing, because, well, if they see a video message from me and they're like, fucking hell man, that guy's a weapon, they won't reply. Whereas if they see a video from me and they're like, fucking hell man, that guy's so charismatic, I want to like potentially even get to know more about his business, like it opens the door to so many valuable connections.
And I think what's important is like I love how selfless that is. Like that is admirable, by the way. I think you should snap that up and like send that as a clip or something like that, because that's such a good approach. Using like Twitter and both Twitter and LinkedIn are really good platforms. I don't really use Twitter too much for podcasting, but because of the open source kind of UI or UX of Twitter, you can jump into anyone's conversation.
Yeah.
You don't need permission to get into someone's discussion. You just at them. But similar to LinkedIn, like you'll find so many really profound, celebritized, high-profile people on LinkedIn, and you can actually add them. Like it's not a follow, it's an add.
Yeah.
And if they add, which they often do, if they add you back, you can go straight into their DMs. So like I've had some amazing podcasts, like the CEO of Sony Music, the guy that signed Amy Winehouse and like Blur and Radiohead. Like I got him on LinkedIn. Who else? But I think it's important to add value to these people. First of all, like thankfully my podcast mission statement is value additive, because it's selfless, it's kind of charitable. So they get something from doing it. It adds value to them. But there's other guests, like I'm trying to think of someone, Nick Yaris, right? The guy who, I think he's just coming to Scotland, by the way. Nick Yaris, the guy that was on death row for 22 years for a rape and murder that he didn't commit. He's been on Rogan, spoke at the UN, spoke with Robin Sharma. I've got traces of messages to him before I started a podcast, when I listened to him on Rogan, just saying, I shared your story with XYZ. And then a year later, I revisited this, Nick, really enjoyed this, is what I learned away. You should write a post about XYZ. And it follows the kind of Gary Vaynerchuk jab, 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 right hook method. Have you heard of that?
Yep.
Yeah. So like just provide so much value that you kind of shift the power dynamic that they're vulnerable to kind of equal that transaction by giving you something back. And I feel like by you sliding into people's LinkedIn messages using video, targeted video messaging, and you're making it all about them, you've probably given them all, you've taken all the leverage off of them, because you've provided with them so much value and compliments and insight and observations that they almost probably feel compelled to give you a 15-minute call or 30-minute call, or to jump on your network.
Definitely,
so
mate.
That's admirable, mate. I really like that.
I appreciate that, man. I think it's the genuine aspect of like all the things you kind of touched on there. The issue that people potentially lead with is that they have the thought process that they want opportunities from it. They want something in return. Whereas the most like selfless acts, most of the time when people start something with no intent of gaining anything from it, they get plenty, like as a result of it. And it's a very interesting kind of weird kind of paradox that, in the form of reciprocity, I guess, where when you give plenty, you do in fact actually give plenty in return. And when I think about, I love the kind of thought process or the story around the kind of taxi rank, because I think when I think about any of the kind of relationships I've built, let's say the first in-person podcast guest of Josh Gianelli, do you know when I first met him, we played some COD, me and Liam Boyce hopped on, Gino hopped on, played some COD for about an hour, and I was getting ready to hop off. Liam had already hopped off, and Gino was having some issues with his streaming setup at the time. I just sat for like an hour and a half, worked through it with him, had never met him prior. I'm not doing that with the thought process of, oh my god, if I do this, I'm going to be friends with Josh Gianelli. Like, I'm doing it because I want to help him. And I think that then blossomed into a good friendship and a good relationship. Whereas where people will go wrong with it is that they have the intent of, I am going to do X to gain Y. Yeah. And it's like, mate, just fucking like do that selfless act, amplify that level of genuineness. You will get plenty in return, man. But even if you don't, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's, and I see that in your interactions with all of our mutual friends as well. I think that's a huge trait that you have. I want to ask you a question, and I'm going to
Go
park
for
it
it.
just for now, right? But I want to just make a quick observation or reflect on my own kind of flavour of that. Like I said, when I spoke to Nick Yaris, I didn't have a podcast at the time. I was just genuinely complimenting him.
Yeah.
And I think when people do lead with this intent, the person on the other side, they can smell it a mile away, like a bloodhound. They can smell it. And a beautiful story about the story with Jen from the taxi rank is, like, she just offered me a taxi that she was taking anyway, just generosity because I couldn't pay for one. Only like 2 months ago, I hosted a conference in Manchester. The first I think it's the first in British business social mobility conference. Had like the only professor for social mobility there. The CEOs of the biggest charities in the UK affecting this cause or contributing to this cause, and Gary Neville. And it was also who also was invited was like 100 of the top CEOs of the biggest businesses like Microsoft, some of the biggest law firms in the UK. And I got to invite Jen and her small, like, it's not a small charity, but in terms of who were there, I got to invite her and she got like top table. And she made so many connections and clients out of the back of that. And that was me finally getting to say thank you for your generosity. Because like I said, like she paid for that taxi. She came to Irvine and gave me advice. She jumped to my podcast as my first guest. And finally, out of her generosity, I got to give her a little chunk back.
Yeah.
And that was so full circle.
That's amazing.
I'm glad that you actually allowed me to like reflect on that story. I never thought about it like that until now. So thank you.
It's amazing, mate. That level of like reciprocity or even just giving of any nature, mate, like kind of comes back to that kind of point we touched on with like people coming into business and they'll dim that aspect, they'll dim the genuineness, they'll dim the pure intent with the thought process that they have to be these, you know, guys in white suits that, you know, are have incredible sales tactics to get clients over the line and to actually grow. And it's like people like if they know that you have their purest intentions at heart and you're providing a service that can actually help their business grow, why the fuck would they not work with you?
So a question I wanted to ask that was parking on very very much on this, right? And it's so we're talking about this kind of 19-year-old archetype, someone that doesn't have many people in his network or her network, and is looking just to kind of immerse himself in the world of entrepreneurialism. How can they use because we're all generous, we all can be generous. How can someone that feels like they've not got much to give, how can they be of service to these people these big profile people that they want to serve?
I'll give you a perfect example of how that's happened recently. So I've got a young guy, Victor, who's doing all my content for me. He sent me an in-mail on LinkedIn about a month and a half ago. And the headline of the in-mail actually nearly made me not even open it. I didn't open it for a week. But the in-mail, because I thought it was just automated, and it said, "I want to work for you for free, John." That was what the title was of the in-mail. And I thought, fucking hell, that's automated as fuck. I've seen that before. Like, patch it. Left it. Week later, rolled round, going through my messages, and I seen it, and I just opened it. And the first paragraph was completely personalised. It was, "I've seen you, or I've spoken about, like, people have spoken about you through this guy, Jack Carlin, who's not even a client of mine, just someone I know on LinkedIn. I've heard Nick Garrity speak about you, who is one of my clients. And I've also watched your episode with Connor Joss on the podcast. Fucking loved it. Love Connor. Love what he's doing. I also really want to join your network, but I don't believe my business is at that level yet. And as a result of that, I would like to offer to work for you for free for a month in return of a testimonial." How the fuck can I say no to that, mate?
That is, whoever's watching this, find out what your kind of USP is and do that. Offer it to someone for free. And even get like that's like a very local version of Gary Vaynerchuk's story. Like he had that guy D-Rock that films all his day in the lives, and now he's like one of the most prolific kind of videographers in the kind of business space. Like he worked for Gary. He did the exact same thing to Gary Vaynerchuk. Offered to work for free, and I can't believe like now that guy's your video editor because of that like proper human interaction. Like he was a fan before he was a friend. That's awesome, mate.
I think one of the most important things to touch on that, and thank you for that, mate, is that a lot of people will do that for someone that doesn't have pure intent, so it's not reciprocated well, and people take advantage of people like that, which is why some people actually dim it down. They don't do things like that because they're scared that they get taken advantage of. They're scared that they get milked or whatever it may be. And if you can apply what Victor has done and consume people's content, watch them on LinkedIn for like a month if they're posting daily, watch their socials, if they've got a podcast, like get yourself in any possible way to detect whether or not they are a genuine person. Because if they are, then they'll receive that incredibly well. And if they don't have room for it, they'll be honest with you. And as a result of that, they'll still build a relationship with you. And in terms of how that relationship's blossomed, by the way, not only is he doing my editing for my personal brand and the podcast, he's now working with Jude in the space of about a month and a half, which is incredible. And I think that's something that, not to like fucking toot my own horn, I genuinely care about Victor. I care about what he does.
You didn't exploit him at all?
Not at all. And even like recently, he's now working with Jude. He's took on quite a big workload with that. And first thing I messaged him last night was, by the way, we've got like 4 podcasts that we've shot in the last week. It's going to be 5 on April 3rd as well. Like at any point this gets too much, like please communicate it to me. Like please, like this, like there is no way, I don't want you fucking getting overwhelmed or feeling stressed out or anything of this nature. Communicate it to me. If someone doesn't have pure intent, that doesn't come out of their mouth. They don't give a fuck. They want you to still do what you've said you're going to do. Whereas if you truly care about someone, it doesn't matter, mate. In terms of that kind of example, I guess, and relating it back to yourself, what has kind of been a genuine selfless act that you've done recently?
I guess the Burberry British Diversity Awards. I got, because I was up for 3, or we were up for 3 different categories. It meant that we got more spaces at the table at the event. So I had like 3 or 4 empty seats that I could fill, and I had the opportunity to invite people like who are apprentices and people from a lower socioeconomic background to come to something like that. It didn't cost me anything to do that, but I could have invited a girl, I could have invited a friend, I could have invited anyone to that, but I got the opportunity to really celebrate the successes and the hard work and the emotional labour and the behind the scenes work that these people have done to help me build this network. I got to bring them along to meet Alison Hammond or Dame Kelly Holmes or whoever else was there on the day, and you could see how special it was to them because they were like FaceTiming their parents and taking videos and stuff like that. So I think that's probably a selfless act that I've done recently.
I definitely think
and
so.
It cost me nothing. It wasn't an expense to me.
Yeah.
And like I said, this social mobility network is constructed of like 900 members, but also an inner committee of like 20 people that I get to chair. And I am the face. Like, I understand I'm the face of social mobility where I work, and I'm the face of the network. But they do all the work. They're the engine room that keep it going, and they don't want to share their story at times. They don't want to be the face, but they're really passionate about contributing to improving the life outcomes of those from a lower socioeconomic background. So I owed it to them also to be there, and seeing how much it meant to them was amazing. And like I said, it cost me nothing to do.
Yeah.
It was just using space that I was given.
Definitely, mate. It sounds fucking exceptional. You're some man. In relation to your story then, one of the things, and maybe a dimmer light, is the passing of your mum when you were 21, just a few years ago prior to COVID. What kind of impact did that have in your life? I understand it's literally your mum, so it's like, you know.
Yeah. And like, this will be something that I'll be reiterating maybe every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, every 5 years. I'm on a journey with it. So my thoughts now may not be my thoughts in 3 years. It may not be the thoughts I had a year ago. But how I would really reflect on it is, so one of these terms that are kind of fetishized in the self-development community is delayed gratification. Sacrifice now for benefits in the future.
Yep.
Apply that for everything, but memories with family. Do not delay any gratification when it comes to family. I assumed that my mum was going to be around until I was 50. And I could never imagine a household where she wouldn't be around, especially as a young man. And I was on this tenacious, maverick, hard-working apprenticeship program and mission, and I wanted more and bigger and better. I worked so hard. I was chaotic in my endeavours, thinking that I could delay that gratification with her. I won't take her out for coffee now. I won't take her out for a meal. We won't go a walk together because when she turns 60, I'll take her to New York and it'll make up for all of it. Yeah. I never got to that, mate. She died in her late 50s.
Wow. And
I passed up on every single micro moment. I took them out as loans thinking that I could pay them off in the future. Yeah. And I couldn't. I became bankrupt with those memories. And that's something that I need to deal with now and I need to reflect on and learn. So to make it more universal is that, like, generally don't underpraised and overlook the impact of these memories, whether it's just literally sitting watching Ant and Dec's Saturday Night Takeaway. I don't even know if that's on the TV or it's something like those little things. Because I'd be upstairs in my room doing an hour extra of work, or I'd be going to the gym, improving myself. And like, it's important to do these things, but like for me, I was just so tenacious as a young man that I thought, I'm doing this in service of my mum. We didn't have any money at home. Like my mum literally had £5 in her bank as a grown woman.
No.
I seen she had anxiety and depression because we had no money in the house. She didn't go out and go shopping sprees. She never went out for fancy dinners. She never done any of this stuff. So I was working in service of her. So it felt like it was a worthwhile endeavor, working really hard in my bedroom. So one day it would pay off and I could take her to New York, and she deserved all that. But I actually passed on the moments that really mattered. I would have rather been nowhere with her than New York without her. Unfortunately. So I think that was one of the biggest lessons. It's like to not downplay those micro interactions. And to be honest, she probably would have rather have spent every night with me than go to New York. Actually, I want to share a beautiful story. Like we never had much growing up. Like my mum didn't work; she couldn't get a job. She was in and out of like low-paid employment when I was much younger, and I seen the effect of that on the morale of a person. Like not having meaning. One thing that all humans cohesively possess is the desire to feel important. She never felt important at all. She was just at home waiting for me to come home from work. And every single day she would watch TV, and an advert for Trump Turnberry would come on every single day. And she used to make jokes because we had no money. She used to say, David, I think I'm going to book a holiday there for next week. Just like totally tongue in cheek. She never meant it at all. Or I'm going to go for an afternoon tea there. And this is one memory I'm really glad that I shared with her. So it was her birthday, and I convinced her that my mate, because we never had much money, and at the time I was an apprentice, never had much money, and I convinced her that we were going to an opening of a new restaurant in a small village called Maybole. So she had to wear really nice clothes because we're going to get a photo taken. It's my friend's restaurant. And in fact, my friend actually, his dad was the general manager of Turnberry. And he sorted me out a deal to go to like this Sunday brunch or whatever else. It was quite expensive, really bougie. And that's what I booked for her. But she thought she was going to this little cafe, and that meant the world. The fact that she was getting her photo taken, like a woman that felt no importance, like someone was going to take her photo for the day, for her birthday. Like that was amazing for her. So we're driving this coastal route towards the town of Maybole, where Turnberry nearly is, and we get to the gates of Turnberry, and I just turn in, and she just like burst into tears. The fact that like it's like now that I'm someone that can afford that, I could do that every weekend if I wanted to. And that's not me, like I'm not rich, but I'm comfortable enough to do something like that. But how much that really meant to her, because she had nothing, never felt important, and seen this thing on the TV, and it was nothing but a pipe dream to just go for a dinner or a lunch at somewhere like Turnberry. So I'm glad that I've got like a memory like that. But besides that, I've not really got many memories that I'm proud of. Because like I said, I was tenacious in my work ethic and stuff. And I can't no matter how much I work now, how much money I make, I can't buy those back, John. I really can't.
It was a very interesting in that story, mate. Is incredibly moving, mate. There's something that's is really fitting for that, which is that I got sent a video just 2 days ago to watch this, and purely in relation to this. And the question that was asked was, if I was to give you £1 million tomorrow, would you be forever happy? And the answer was, the guess at the time was yes, 100%, yeah, that would solve all my issues. And the guy then goes, right, cool, if I made it 10 million, how would you feel? And it was the same, I'd be in utopia. I would be, I couldn't even describe it. I'd be able to do so many things. And then he goes, cool, if I told you that you wouldn't wake up tomorrow, would you take it? And the first thing the guy says is, well, no. And it's because so many people will trade money, trade everything for that future that may very well not come. And as a result of that, people don't possess gratitude in the thought of just waking up tomorrow and getting on with things, mate.
I heard a quote from a billionaire. He said, when I was 21, I wanted to be a billionaire. When I was a billionaire, I wanted to be 21. And one of the other things I learned about life is one of the other things I learned through the passing of my mum was, and it's so cliched, that life is actually remarkably short. Like we are just like a flicker of light in the grand scheme of things. And I learned that, like, one lesson I can pass on to people is to gamify immortality. So think about the things that you would do. So if you were told that you're John, and I'm sorry to be so grim, right?
No,
to walk you through this. But can I walk through you through an exercise right now? If I were to tell you right now, John, your mum's just been diagnosed with a terminal illness and she will pass away in 7 days. What are the things that you would do?
I spend every moment of those 7 days with her.
You would, wouldn't you? Yeah. You'd write down all the memories that you'd want to take, all the things that you want to say, and all the things you want to experience with her. Why not doing those things right now today? Like later on today or tomorrow or the next day? And because I learned that through my mum, like I actually found the reality of that. Like I didn't play it as a game. It actually happened to me. I learned that lesson, and now it's my duty to pass that on to the other people that are important in my life. My sister, my dad. What are the things I still have to say to my dad? What are the things I still have to say to my sister? The things I need to do with them, the care that I need to give them, the space and the generosity and the compassion and the love that I still have to give them. Like I'm trying to be so mindful, and I'm not doing a great job of it. I'm working on it. So, like I said, my reflections in 5 years might be very different. But learning through the harsh reality of losing my mum has allowed me to learn that lesson and try and improve on that for parents.
What do you think your mum would say now?
Well, one thing that if any of your listeners suffer with young grief is that my mum's here with you. My mum's talking to you. Like it's like I'm not just me. I'm passing on everything that she's sitting in this room. Like all the values, the kind of the cheerfulness and adversity that she had, the compassion for humanity. They're all embodied in me. Like, so to give you a story of why I do what I do, the social mobility network is that, like I said, we didn't have any money growing up. I was so tenacious. I was told as an 11-year-old kid. I used to bake and sell tablet around the house. And I didn't have my accountancy qualification at the time, so I was probably a net loss, right? But I had change in my hand, right? I had money in my hand. And my uncle, who was like a clerk in a bank, he said to me, David, you're good at counting that money. You could be an accountant. They make a lot of money. And literally the jackpot sound effect went off in my head. Because I knew how much financial fragility impacted my family. And that was the first time, coming from a working class town, it was the first thing that was beyond the blue collar jobs that I could see or the unemployment I could see, that was something that I could point a name at that could maybe alleviate the struggles that my mum was going through. So I constructed an entire career of not being at service for me and my goals, but to improve the quality of life of my mum. So that's the reason I was so tenacious as a young person, why I got help from a charity to go to KPMG. I worked in one of the most kind of ludicrous apprenticeship programs in the UK and really became a maverick within that apprenticeship cohort, because I'm just trying to pave the way or make a way just to give her the simple delights that the neighbours had. So when she passed away, not only did she die, that whole construct of identity died alongside her. That whole North Star of taking her to New York or providing her with the luxuries that the neighbours had, that died alongside her. So it was my duty from thereafter to take the lessons that she had and she gave me and pay the new North Star and take that on its way. So that's why I say she's sitting here. This is it is egotistical for me to share my story in this podcast, but I hope it's also a service to other people that's doing good for others. That's why I do my podcast. I don't make money on it. I do it because, like I said, Tom Hunter was the first relatable role model that I had. And I wanted to create a directory of relatable role models. So everything I do is because of my mum and that passing. I want to be at service to others because ultimately she's over my shoulder watching this interview. And I need to be comfortable with the story that I'm telling you. Will she be happy with this? Hopefully so, because hopefully it's the same story that she would tell.
That's powerful, man. And I guess in the topic of, you touched on something about the Burberry British Diversity Awards, which was that you FaceTimed your dad up on the balcony. I take it that journey that you've went on has played a massive part in including your dad in things like that.
Yeah, it has been. It really has. It's been difficult. There's been challenges with my dad, of course. Like, unfortunately, losing his partner, his lifelong partner, the mother to his kids, has been disastrous for him. He already suffered with mental health conditions. He was a Falklands veteran, guarded Buckingham Palace, guarded at Princess Diana's wedding, saved lives in a London fire, been in Northern Ireland and the Falklands. So he suffered greatly from the aftermath of that. His brother committed suicide, lost his dad when he was in his 20s. I was born a twin. grew up with no money, and then his partner dies. Like, of course, he's very lost. So it was, and it was a really stark moment when I realized that I became the kind of father in the relationship, which is strange.
Yeah.
When I was there to kind of support him, and I don't think he was aware of that. I think he always thought he was the tyrant and I was a slave.
Yep.
For a while, but only recently did I realize that he now admits that I'm the tyrant and he's the slave, or the master and the slave, or the dad and the son, whatever kind of archetype you want to use to describe it. And that was when I phoned him. Like, he phoned me out of the blue for 4 days and was like, David, you haven't phoned me in 4 days? Because I've moved to Glasgow. You've not phoned me in 4 days? And I said, but Dad, you're my dad. You're meant to phone me. You're my caregiver. And he went, oh, am I? And I was like, oh, well, I realized that relationship, that power dynamic, that emotional labor is on the other foot now. So it's now my duty, if that's where he is in his life, it's my duty to support him.
Yeah.
So now I get the opportunity to, like, FaceTime at those awards. I'm going home after this to show him all that stuff. So he feels meaning in, because he's unemployed, he's in his 60s, he's retired.
Yeah.
His role now is, I'm trying to give him the father figure role back, to give him power and importance. So if I go home and say, Dad, this is what we've done together, this is what you've done to me, and this is where we've got to, hopefully I can build that self-esteem back and kind of hopefully somewhat flip that relationship to at least an equilibrium at some points.
Absolutely.
So I think, my goal, kind of, I know that's a very sob story, but my goal is to recognize my dad's impact in building me as a person, and celebrating that with him, opposed to being like, Dad, look, I've left you behind. Like, I'm not doing that. I'm not saying, Dad, I've left you behind, and now I'm looking after you, and look at all the great things I'm off to do.
Yeah.
No, it's so important for me to be like, this is us. This is what we're doing together. I'm doing this because of you, and that's important.
Absolutely, mate. And I think it's something that it's important that you've had such a kind of supportive environment with your mum and dad kind of growing up, and supporting you kind of on the journey that you're on now, where there is no, your dad isn't envious of the fact that you're going on and doing things that he didn't get to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that when most people are growing up and they want to do something really ambitious, for me it was gaming, for it's now turned into entrepreneurship. For a lot of people it is entrepreneurship. They want to go off, they want to start their own business. They maybe don't have supportive parents, and it can be really hard for them. Obviously, as a result, they have to almost bargain to like get time alongside going to like uni, for example, to then run their business or whatever it may be. But one thing that's not really touched on is when you have that kind of supportive environment at home. If I think about one of the things that keep in my mind when you're talking there, which is I don't necessarily like to relate to my own story because it's your episode, mate, and I want to touch on so many important things that you've brought to
I want to hear all about you.
Brought to the table, mate. I do appreciate that, mate, and I think it's something that I get a text from my gran, and it's always the same thing, which is, "Are you busy, John? You know, or like, I'm guessing that you're busy, John, but just an off chance that you're not, like, you know, would you like to do X, for example?" And I even just texted her, just literally, I think it was yesterday. Hey, Gran, gonna come over for lunch on Sunday. I'll pick up some food and I'll come over and we'll eat some food and we'll watch some, whatever it is, if the football's on or whatever it may be. And her first reply to that was, "Only if you're not busy." And I think it's something that actually hit me. I actually didn't reply to it for a little bit because I was like, fuck, man, like my gran actually thinks that like my business is more important than spending time with her. And you know, it's my own fault for that. Like I work on my business every single day. I don't see my gran every day. So like in the exchange of that, it would make sense why that would maybe possibly be assumed, which is completely understandable. But one of the things I did want to kind of paraphrase, or I guess around that, is when you have that kind of level of supportive environment, you're able to just go off and just do your own thing and spend as much time as humanly possible, and you know that they've always got your back and they're always there to support you. But there is actually I don't know, almost like an exchange where it kind of transitions into them feeling like they're potentially burdening you with the time that they potentially want to spend with you. Is that something that you've experienced?
I just want to I want to touch back on your story and ask you a question. It's just my natural like tendency as a host, because I really like that story. So you probably would describe yourself as someone like I'm just making assumptions here, so correct me if I'm wrong. You'd probably describe yourself as someone who's available for your gran, who prioritizes her, who loves her, who cares for her, right? But maybe your actions don't back that up. And remember I said earlier, your self-esteem is a reputation you have with yourself.
Yep.
So perhaps like, even though you know and you feel and you say that you love her and you're going to be around her and you have the best intentions, perhaps it's because your actions or optics don't match that. She can see online on Facebook or wherever else that you're really busy. So it's like perhaps you're at an inner conflict or inner citadel where you are struggling to have that self-esteem about the situation you were grand because the actions are not aligning with your intent on that. Because I know your actions align with your intent with everything else, but maybe not on that specific micro dynamic. Sorry to flip the question back to you.
I would definitely agree, mate. I would definitely agree. And it's something that will be...
I'm only asking that because I realised that myself. It's a journey that I've been on. I realised I do have... If I were to ask my best friends or my sister or my dad and my mum when she was alive, how would you describe David? It would be like, ambitious? Yeah, ambitious, definitely. Aspiring? Yeah, definitely. Unavailable? Busy? Vacant? And I was like, fuck. When I realised that that's how they would describe me. And they've not said that to me, but I know that. And it made me realise what's important to me. And I did an exercise of like listing like 10 priorities, 10 things that are important to me in my life. And I realised the first 3 were status, desirability, family / tribe. But I realised that I was finding it so much easier to gain the validation and recognition from strangers through the status and the desirability of the podcast and everything else at expense to the one that actually meant the most to me, my family. So that's just a reflection on that.
Definitely.
So all I'm saying is I relate to it as well.
No, absolutely, mate. And I think you've summarised it very well, man, with something that's really actionable as well, which is that, you know, if you're wanting to work out what your priorities are, you feel like maybe you're not giving the correct amount of energy or time to those that are closest to you, doing something like what David just listed off there is incredibly important, man. And it would serve so many people very well because they would be able to actually see their hierarchy within their mind of like what actually is, you know, top, which are a lot of people, it will be family, but you get so caught up, like you said, being young, ambitious, wanting to do a shit ton of stuff, and feeling like life would maybe pass you by if you didn't.
And also outsourcing your self-worth to others as well. I do that quite badly.
Definitely, mate. I think we've touched on so much good shit, man. Like so much good shit to the point that it's almost like looking at all the kind of questions that we've had that we did prep. I feel like this was something that became really intimate experience, mate, and I love that, man. Like I feel like that's when you think about why you do the podcast episodes, this is very much why I do them. And I prep the questions beforehand, but if I can become fully immersed where that flow state is activated, I think that's worth more than any amount of potential valuable question that could potentially come of that, mate.
Yeah, and I was grateful that you sent me these questions, some of which we used, some of which we didn't, some were off the cuff. I was so delighted that you shared them with me, but one of the principles, like I told you how important authenticity was for me. I said to you, yeah, John, I did read them, but I didn't prep for them. Like I looked them in on the walk here because I just wanted I just wanted to let what came to mind as you prompted me through this discussion or through this dance of words. So I'm glad that we could bring it in an intimate tone, and I'm honestly so delighted for the space and the time and the compassion that you've had with my story because we have went deep.
We have. I couldn't agree more, mate. And I appreciate you coming on. But there is one kind of final thing that I do want to touch on. You touched on it a bit earlier on that you wanted to do your own thing, do your own charity, but you're advised potentially otherwise, or otherwise. And one of the things I did certainly have prepped was whether or not we're going to see David McIntosh in the entrepreneurial side of things.
100%. I think like what I've started at KPMG, the Social Mobility Network, it runs like a business. It has a budget. I manage 20 to 30 people. I have a strategy. I deploy it just like a business. I report to senior stakeholders, like you would investors, and connecting with clients. Like I had that conference and stuff like that. So I'm going to use that as a model, learn from that. And at some point in my life, I'm sure I'm going to make it my own, maybe in Scotland. I've got some ideas. I don't want to say them out loud because if I say them out loud, I'll get the dopamine hit from doing it. But what I'm saying is that there's a lack of provision within the social mobility space within Scotland. All of these charities operate at a UK level or England level. All these kind of awards that celebrate inclusion and diversity or social mobility happen in England. There is a real need for employers, universities, schools, and parents to work together to improve social mobility and its outcomes in Scotland. Perhaps I'll create a solution for that at some point. I might monetize my podcast a bit more, commercialize it a bit more. Stand-up comedy, I can maybe get paid for at some point. There's a few other endeavors I don't want to say aloud because it'll curse the dopamine hit, so I'm not going to say them out loud. But yeah, I think you'll see that at some point, mate.
Definitely, man. I could tell, because I think the podcast in its own, how you like just even conduct it, your prep. Even one of the things I found really admirable when I was coming in and I was listening to it was obviously you told me about the ChatGPT kind of prompts now, but the introduction you gave to Rob Lipsett, summarised, personable to you, your experience. That's all good, mate. These things happen. David's getting phone calls.
My dad.
Your dad.
He's like, where are you? I've got my phone and do not disturb as well.
It's all good, mate. Very fitting for what we kind of discussed it before. But yeah, we'll be round that. I mean, what time are we at? How long are we at, Paul? 1:10. I think it's a good note to kind of summarise on, I think, mate, which is that within entrepreneurship, I'm not surprised that you're potentially pondering it with the way in which you conduct a podcast, but also the way in which I see what you founded with KPMG, and I think it's something that a lot of people can take away from. You'll be able to take a lot away from and apply it to your own business or model in the future. Yeah, I think it's incredibly important.
One thing that's been adaptive of the podcast is that, like, speaking with Sir Tom Hunter, a man that's was literally a billionaire who has a Bugatti and whatever else, or speaking with other successful entrepreneurs, it makes you blood hungry for it. And I think it's important not to get, because for me it's easy as my inner circle or my contacts change, like Sir Tom Hunter, Rory, people like that, Rory Sutherland. You feel the need, because I'm like the bottom rung of that crowd now. You feel a need to chase more and kind of fit in a bit more. So I need to remind myself that having a career is okay. Doing a podcast as a hobby is absolutely fine. Doing stand-up because I love it is also great. And I don't need to put pressure on myself to be an entrepreneur, because I can make it work where I'm working. Like, if I make it to partner at KPMG, I'll be a millionaire as well. They make silly money. So like, having a corporate career is okay as well. So we'll see.
Definitely.
I don't want to. Long-term planning is somewhat overrated at times. It says it dampens like spontaneous events. So something might come up with my podcast. Someone might invite me to be a co-founder or something. We'll never know, but I'm open for it.
Very true, mate. On a kind of ending question, on a closing question, what advice would you give to a 19-year-old want to come into entrepreneurship?
Probably the advice of understand what you want. Being crystal clear on that, culling everything that doesn't contribute to that, understanding what outcomes you want in that realm, understanding what table that would occur at, understanding who sits at that table, and asking for an invite to that table.
Love that, mate. If people wanted to find your podcasts, anything that you do, where can they find you?
David McIntosh on LinkedIn, David McIntosh Jr. on Instagram for the personal. If you want to check out the pod, it's the Development by David podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Music. Its mission statement is to use origin stories as a self-development tool. I'm sure there'll be an episode for your kind of preference there. I guess that's it.
Love that, mate. Thank you so much for coming on, brother.
Mate,
honestly, it's been fucking an amazing episode, man. If you're on Spotify, make sure you ring the bell. We're putting podcast episodes up every 2 weeks at the moment. If you're on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. I think there's some sort of notification thing on YouTube as well. And yeah, we've got so many more guests coming on that are just as exceptional as David. This might be one of my personal favourites, mate, honestly. Just the fact that we went so deep, I think it's so valuable. And thank you for coming on, mate.
Oh, cheers, mate. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the space and compassion.
Love that, brother.